Coverage on USC and UCLA leaving the Pac-12 for the Big Ten. Our Matt Norlander has confirmed that news. Several reports that they could be joining the Big Ten as early as 2024, so that would be 2 years away. These are two historic programs in college football and two programs that have been in the Pac-12 or similar. It was then called the Pacific Coast Conference. For 100 years or so. The USC joined the Pacific Coast Conference 100 years ago exactly. UCLA joined 94 years ago. And now they are looking to move to the Big Ten. That would mean 16 teams in the Big Ten to match the SEC's 16, with Texas and Oklahoma joining the fold. Let's bring in our Dennis Dodd, who covers both college football, college basketball, and all college athletics for us at CBSSports.com. Dennis, a lot of us blindsided today by this seismic move in college athletics, but if we've learned anything over this last year, 2 years, decade, it's that we should always be ready for something like this. What more can you tell us about the move?
Yeah, right. This makes Texas, Oklahoma look like child's play. At least we knew they always had options because of who they were. USC and UCLA breaking a bond that goes back almost a century with the Pac-12 for the Big Ten, it just kind of confirms what's happening now. It's coagulating at the top. We have confirmed that they are at least in discussions, that this could happen as early as 2024. My first question is, I'm thinking about a guy like Lincoln Riley. He had to know about this when he interviewed or thought about USC in December. He had to know this was a possibility, and goes a long way towards answering the question, why did he leave? I had one administrator just tell me that as far as he's concerned, the Pac-10, what is now the Pac-10 and the Big 12 look more like the American right now. And if you want to talk about those 30 schools, you want to talk about a breakaway, we're witnessing it right now. No, they're not going to be 30 schools playing by themselves, but I think in the future, Chris, it's going to be those 30 plus whatever, 50, 30, whatever, that step forward and play on that level, commit to that level in terms of revenue. So this has obviously been going on for a while. I just talked to a Pac-12 AD who was extremely upset. We have to know that this was kept a secret from everyone in the league for a long, long time, and from Commissioner George Kliavkoff, who's in the middle of negotiating a new TV rights deal. So this was bound to happen, Chris, with I call it the last helicopter out of Saigon syndrome, with those schools in the Big Ten and the Pac-12 making $80 million when the dust settles in their new TV rights deals. It was going to be whoever else wants to join them, and obviously USC and UCLA had the juice to do so.
So we know the TV contracts and the streaming rights drive a lot of this. And right now, the Big Ten is involved in that. How do you even go about these negotiations when maybe one or both sides don't know who's actually going to be in the conference?
Well, because when the SEC did their deal last year, last July, when word leaked of Texas and Oklahoma, there's a reopener in the contract which allowed them to renegotiate. So in 2024, I think the year is when Texas, Oklahoma joined, that number is going to go up to $80 million per school, or at least that's what industry sources say. Now, for the Big Ten to keep up, and that's what a lot of this is, it's merely keeping up with the Joneses. They were going to have to add. Now they have 16 schools. Now they're going to have $80 million each. At some point, they reached out. When Texas and Oklahoma happened, Chris, there were only a handful of schools in terms of realignment that had the leverage and the juice to make a decision. USC and UCLA were two of those. Maybe Washington, maybe Oregon, definitely Clemson, Miami, and Florida State. And I think that's the next question that has to be answered. Have they given the SEC a call to join? Now, there's a grant of rights in the ACC, but we always know that things can be worked out in court. We've seen it over the last 10 years. So I think those are the next dominoes to pay very close attention to as these super conferences, tend to coagulate and form at the top. Will there even be a Pac-10? Does it merge with the Big 12, what's left of the Big 12 now, and they form their super conferences? All those questions are on the table.
And the decision makers for the three conferences that as of right now are left out of what we're calling the super conferences now, the Big 10 and the SEC, you've got the Pac-12, Big 12, ACC, and if I'm not mistaken, Dennis, they all have commissioners that have what, maybe a year at most on the job?
Yeah, the Big 12 does not have a commissioner. They just named Brett Yormark, who's due to come in any day. I think I talked to Bob Bowlesby today. He's leaving August 1st, so there's a transition period then. So not only is that new commissioner going to have to do a new TV deal, but now probably deal with realignment. There's going to be reaching out from the Pac-12, from the Big 12, I would suspect, to the Pac-12 to see what kind of relationship they can do there. Jim Phillips in the ACC actually is in the best position right now. They have a TV contract that goes through 2036. They have a grant of rights. I mentioned Clemson, Florida State, and Miami. They'd have to get through that, but they have a solid membership now. Maybe the money isn't very big, but that's going to work itself out. We're going to see how that plays out with those top two conferences. So, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough competing against those two conferences. They're going to have resources to not only do whatever they want, to recruit better than everybody else, but now dictate policy. Just think about this, Chris. If those two conferences, sooner or later, 2024, say, yeah, you know what, we want to play with 95 scholarships instead of 85. There'll be a lot of schools in FBS that can't afford that. And I think we wrote about it in a series this week. I think that's what's going to happen. You're going to see another division form. I don't know if that's the worst thing in the world, that they'll play for less money, but there will be a playoff at that next level. And I think you're seeing FBS break up before our eyes right now.
So we could have playoffs at two different levels here then, is what you're saying. You could have the super conferences, Big Ten, SEC, having their own playoff, and then the other conferences doing their own thing. I mean, what happens here? What's the impact of today's news?
Well, to me, it's right now, to me, it's not just those 30 schools in those leagues. It's the schools that want to play along and try to reach that level. I don't know what that is. Is it 50 schools? Is it 80 schools? Will those two conferences look down their noses at the likes of what the Big 12 is now? I don't know. But as far as that next level, I call it Division 4, if it ever forms, playoff. It was priced. I did a story on it 5 years ago. It was priced at $160 million. Had the group of five gone off on their own at that time and staged their own playoff, it would have been worth that. Now, since then, Chris, you've got the tech giants, you've got streaming, you've got Turner, you've got NBC. All of these networks now and streaming are desperate for content. And I know it isn't Texas and Oklahoma and those main schools that we just referred to, but it is content, and it is live content, and that sells. So I think that would be a pretty penny, and I think people would watch it.
All right, Dennis, we're going to let you go. Check your phone. That might have been an alert that Oregon and Washington are leaving the Pac-12 as well. We'll see. That has been suggested that this might not be over, and I think it's far from over right now. Dennis Dodd with us here on HQ. Let's look at how the new Big Ten would look throughout the country. My goodness.
It's crazy when you see it on a map.
I'm old enough to remember when the Big Ten had 10 teams, and they were all in the Midwest. Iowa and Minnesota were the teams that were the furthest to the west. Ohio State and Michigan were the teams that were farthest to the east. They added Penn State, then they added Nebraska, then Rutgers and Maryland for some reason. And now USC and UCLA, all the way out there on the Pacific Ocean, are planning to join the Big Ten as early as 2024.